Okay. Gabby, thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely.
I have been looking forward to this for a very long time, and I think there's going to be a lot of great things to come out of this conversation today. I think like one of the things I wanted to just start off right off the bat, coming to your practice has really kind of like opened my eyes to the reality of integrating ourselves with our nervous system, coming into connection with that. What's one of the like most exciting things that you've recently kind of like made a discovery on that has brought you into that world?
Wow.
And we can dive into an easier question if you want to come back to it.
I feel ready. I feel ready. I think something that is just so incredible to just contemplate is the fact that we are all here to be mirrors for one another. Right. And so I take care of a lot of people in the perinatal space for those who don't know. So that's a lot of mother baby dyads. It's a lot of family units of sorts. And we talk about the fact that parents, and typically mom, for the most part, is going to serve as one of the most stable co-regulators for the family unit. And she is there to essentially mirror to her children how to navigate their world.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we can also look at that so far beyond just like the mother baby dyad unit, we could say. And we can look at that as the fact that anyone who walks in here is ultimately just one big mirror for me. Yeah. And I am that for each and every person who comes into here. And so a mentor of mine talks about that, yes, people think that they're coming to me for care and to get their needs met. And yes, they are. And let me tell you that it's actually just as reciprocal for me, because every single person who walks through these doors, and ultimately every person that we ever come into contact with, is here to show us where our work lies and to demonstrate to us, really just more of who we are.
That's amazing. And it's also kind of crazy because, I can totally agree on that. That's literally my job, is to hold a mirror up to people. So,
yes.
But yeah, it's kind of crazy. And also I think, I've always heard a lot of those stories, and you can probably articulate this better than I can, but it's the idea of when a kid falls, they look to the parent to how they should react. And I've seen some kids take some pretty atrocious accidents happen, and they just kind of get up and walk away because the parent's just oh no, I don't actually need to go overboard. Whereas you've seen people, they just kind of bump their head on a table, and everyone just loses their mind, and then the kid all of a sudden goes, oh wait, no, I'm supposed to be crying over this.
Right. Well, I think, just by nature of how our society is, we live in a society and culture that is severely addicted to drama.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so there are opportunities to check ourselves in that day in and day out, from holy shit, my kid just ate it. Do I want to give them a reaction, or do I want to just hold the container for them to move through however their experience is for them on an innate level? Or, I just said to you that we have an Instagram reel popping off right now, going rather viral. And do I want to play into the drama of what some of those comments might be on that thing? I absolutely do not. So I choose to unsubscribe and not read and not look and engage in a positive way, but I'm not going to allow something that someone says to me in that regard, at the very least, to instigate this this addiction to drama that I personally have been trying really hard to break out of. And it comes in these very unsuspecting ways. Yeah. And so I think, truthfully, my mindset for this year has really been to focus on neutrality.
I love that.
So how can I hold a field of neutrality for people coming in to receive care? How can I not be reactive towards what they are coming with, whether it is uniquely theirs or they are showing up as a mirror for me? Yeah. Right. And then how can we just navigate the state of okay, we can have peaks and valleys, in our day to day. It's inevitable, right? But how can we minimize the intensity of those things and those experiences?
That hits on a theme that I've been trying to nail down for the past several years. I went down a total rabbit hole over the past few years trying to understand the difference in neurotransmitters. I probably have some sort of undiagnosed ADHD. And so as a result, it's listening to enough Huberman podcasts to understand how all these things work in conjunction. Sure. But one of the things I was explaining to a friend a few years ago was okay, so I went down the rabbit hole. I got L-tyrosine. I got, gosh, I'm blanking on all of them right now.
It's all good.
L-theanine, there was a whole bunch of these things that I got. Yeah. And basically the idea is okay, this is going to allow me to have the precursors to build the right things that I need, sure. Serotonin,
Dopamine.
Yeah, all those different things.
Totally.
But what I found out very quickly is, the first week that I did all of this stuff, I would feel that euphoric high. I would get, 40 hours worth of work done in like 3 hours because that's where my brain was at.
Sure.
And then 3 weeks later, it was that like my variation in my mood went from pretty stable to euphoric, suicidal, and that like back and forth. And then I would just like realize like, oh, it's all of these things that I'm doing to try and mitigate this problem that created this out of control thing. And so that's something I'm kind of trying to like articulate to more people now is like, hey, find that balance, because if you can keep it in check, that's where things get a lot better.
Absolutely. I mean, how did you recover from some of that? I'm curious what you went to.
Oh my goodness. I just had to like cold turkey everything.
Okay.
Because it's like, I think for me, one of the things that really blew my mind was that moment when you just straight up cut out caffeine, nicotine, all of the things that cause you to come up and go down.
Totally.
Your body like very quickly will go, hang on, like we got to get back to equilibrium.
Yeah.
And I think like having recently like really dramatically cut back my caffeine and all stimulants, it like the thing that comes with that is the ability to sleep deeper and all of the restorativeness that comes with that. That's been pretty incredible.
Wow. It's so interesting because, the further down this path I go, the more I remember, we could say, that we have everything we need within ourselves. And essentially when we look at chiropractic, that is the premise, right?
Yeah.
The major premise is that we all have an innate intelligence that animates us and orchestrates all physiological, all biological functions within us at every single moment. And that innate intelligence is here with us always. It never leaves us. And I think one of the coolest moments to really like catalog that is like in pregnancy. Where you have two cells that literally come together and somehow motherfucking miraculously grow into 6 trillion and then just like come into the world, and it's mostly perfect most of the time.
Yeah.
But with that, it's so interesting because we as humans are constantly looking for something outside of ourselves, right? To like be the end all be all of like generating change for ourselves. And I am guilty of this. Paul Saldino's creatine, I've been like taking consistently, or like even Instagram ads hit me with some like lion's mane extract, and I have absolutely been taking that for the last 30 days because I'm curious.
Yes.
But I had this moment where I was holding this in my hand, the lion's mane, and I was just like, what if this is it? There was this voice in me that's like, this could change everything. And then it's like, get out of here. You know what I mean? It's like, there's never going to be just this one thing. And I think as humans, we've been on a quest. What is that one thing? And there's a big awakening happening right now of redirection inwards. And so when I talk to people about what the chiropractic adjustment actually is, all it is a redirection of attention, right?
100%.
On a physical level, chemically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And so it takes away maybe, or maybe not, this maybe quenches some of the thirst, I could say, to continue to seek truth outside of ourselves and seek answers outside of ourselves, and stop picking up that thing saying, wow, this might be it. This might be the thing that changes everything. Yeah. I'll be healed after this, and it's like, instead we just generate this sense of curiosity, to continue to go inwards for truth.
Yeah. I am always kind of like, the way that I like to articulate that is like, a lot of people in this world, they are able to provide and care for themselves on such an efficient timeline. I mean, when I look at like, I went from working in coffee shops where, I had to put in the 40 to 60 hours a week. And so my time to take care of myself was very little.
Yeah.
But I also, when you actually like look at that in the scope of history, the fact that I only worked 40 hours a week to be able to provide everything for a roof over my head, food on the table, transportation to get to work, all of those things. And now accelerated even further with where my current job is, I can get that down to just like a few days.
Wow.
And now it's like, okay, what do I do with all that extra free time? And I think this is where people get into a lot of trouble because they work that executive job. And so they're just focused on like, okay, how do I provide for myself? But the reality is that job might not necessarily have the fulfillment to do those things going inward. And so I kind of am like, okay, what can you do in your life to, whether that's cooking your own meals or spending time outside, touch some grass, like be in nature. Like that's a really great way to kind of bring that back into balance.
Oh my God, yeah.
This is actually kind of a curious thing. So knowing, you come from like the world of chiropractic, what is like the thing that really got you interested in specifically focusing on like the mothers and like prenatal, and then also kind of the like integrative nature to it?
Sure. I feel like I must go back a little bit further before I answer that specific question, if that is okay.
Great.
So essentially for me, I came into the world just really terrified of needles and medical doctors and surgery. Anytime growing up, I would go to the doctor, I would almost like go into a dorsal vagal response where like I would faint. I was just so afraid, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was 4 or 5 years old, my mom was supposed to have surgery on her feet. She had something called Morton's neuromas. And so she told us when we were little that she had tomatoes in her feet because they hurt so bad. So we wouldn't step on them, right? You get that visual as a kid and you're like, ugh, I'm not going anywhere near those things.
Yeah.
And I remember going with her to the chiropractor when I was super young. And I remember hearing her getting adjusted. I don't remember like much education on the bigness of it. Like I try to educate my community on it.
Yeah.
However, I vividly remember that she did not have to have surgery because she went to the chiropractor.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So very young age, this was like deeply ingrained. I was profoundly impacted by this experience and was just so moved. And so I always had this sense of kind of like a linear path, which I feel very lucky to have been chosen on a cosmic scale, in that way. But I danced competitively. I played Division I field hockey. I had just like naturally had some stuff come up through the process of like really working my body. And so I went to the chiropractor growing up. I actually don't even remember getting adjusted, but I went to a chiropractor who did what's called ART, active release technique, which is a lot of like muscle work.
Yeah.
Regardless of the experience I had, whether it was like true to the roots of chiropractic or not, it changed my life. And I would walk in feeling one way, would walk out feeling so much better, so much more vital, so much more like myself, and in so much less pain. And so again, it just was like further evidence to pull me along on this path of like going into chiropractic. And what's so funny is I got to school. I went to school in St. Louis at Logan University, and just like arriving there, I just felt more like myself than I probably ever had in my life. It was this very interesting sensation of just like total alignment. And at the time, I might not have had that same vocabulary to use for what I was experiencing, but like in hindsight, it's like, whoa. So I get to school and we start classes and they put a picture up of the spine on the board. And I was like, ugh, when are they going to get to the good stuff? Because that's not what I knew chiropractic to be.
Yeah.
And so as I, moved through school, I started attending seminars. And so if, like many professions, I would say in the school setting, they teach you how to pass your tests, how to be good memorizers, but they don't teach you how to be a monumental human or practitioner or anything of the sort, right? So we attend seminars on the weekends. And so I found some really awesome mentors, some groups to train with, to experience life with, to really just like awaken with. And so it was really my time through seminars that I was like, oh my God, this is so much bigger than me. And also this is how I've been living my life, for these 25 years or thus far, a little bit less at the time.
Yeah.
And I just felt so in love with the principle and philosophy that I was coming to learn about, that I had chosen to enter into. And so a lot of people in the school system like knew right out of the gates they wanted to work with families or mothers or in the perinatal space. And I was just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so out of school, I actually ended up moving to Oslo, to Norway for a bit. And in that time, I just had more pregnant women directly in my face than I ever had in my entire life, probably combined.
That's
and
crazy.
So something in me was just like, there might be something here.
Yeah.
And just as a little like sidebar to this, my sister and I growing up were actually just so terrified of birth and pregnancy. And we used to joke about having surrogates because we didn't want to have to deal with the birth process. And so there's also a large part of me that has thrown myself so deeply into this because of the fear that I had that like ultimately I don't feel like was mine.
Yeah.
Maybe it was societal. Maybe it was from, other things. Who knows? But I just felt like
ultimate facing your fears.
Totally. Yeah. I felt like it was my duty to like work through this before it's my time to bring children into this world. So all that to say, my time in Norway was very influential on that. And I just felt this like something clicked in. It was like, I think I'm supposed to do this. And so I just have followed that thread And, I moved back to Columbus and started the Insight Space in November of 2021. So we're a bit over our 3-year mark. And again, was like calling in all these pregnant moms, all these families. And it's like, okay, well, these pregnant mamas would then go on and have their babies. And then what?
Yeah.
And so I just started to learn and gain profound insight into the support that is required for infants. The birth process is hard, and
Definitely.
Our nervous systems, as a chiropractor, that's what I am most concerned with. Our nervous systems control every single thing in our entire body, and it also, perceives and takes in our entire world, both our outside world and our inside world. And with that, our central nervous system has a built-in system of surveillance that's constantly scanning our environment, outside and in, looking to help us perceive, detect, and embody cues of safety. And if we can start our lives off in a state of safety perception as opposed to a state of mobilization and needing to protect and brace for impact, how does that change the rest of our lives?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
It's like, I remember hearing something a long time ago. It's like the idea of rest and digest is so you can actually like utilize your food. And I remember that was like such a profound change in the way I thought about it, because if you're constantly having to like protect yourself, if like me, you hate ad breaks and podcasts, well, we're going to keep this one straight and to the point. If you need any production help, feel free to hit me up at brandongoodyear.com. Let's get back into the episode. Your body literally can't process the food that you need to nourish yourself,
1,000%.
which is insane.
It's insane, right? And so like, we can think about how many people eat in these like profound states of like stress, or like in the moments between the moments, just like, it's not doing us any favors, we could say.
Exactly.
And really the way that I like to explain that to my clients is, or anyone who dares ask me about chiropractic and the nervous system, our nervous system exists on this continuum, ranging from safety and healing and growth and restoration to mobilization to a state of collapse. And so when we're in that state of healing, growth, and restoration, because we can perceive cues of safety or predictability or clarity or community, we can be in a state of essentially all like regulatory physiological functions, right? Eat, sleep, poop, digest, assimilate, good cycles, relatively simple fertility experiences, we could say. But also, like, most importantly, and I think in the conversations that we have here, and like in this dialogue, that is where we can experience things like creativity, connection to ourselves and others. This is where play happens, where we can socially engage, where we can express curiosity, right? Where we can feel connected to something that is so much larger than us. However, if our nervous system is like, hello, where is the safety? I'm not perceiving it anywhere. We will very quickly and efficiently shift from this place of healing, growth, and restoration to a state of mobilization. Mobilization is akin to things like fight or flight, hypervigilance, anxiety, overwhelm, anger, frustration, rage. And the kicker is our neurology, by way of what's called our neuroception. So this is like the surveillance system that's happening below the level of our consciousness, right? It's constantly like, am I safe? Am I good? Can I settle? Do I need to run? It is working all the time. However, our nervous system does not know the difference between a physical stressor or threat, right? 100%. Like a saber-toothed tiger coming to chase us and our families, and something that is more like mental, emotional, spiritual in nature in terms of a threat perception. So someone leaving a nasty comment on something you've posted, it's like, oh my gosh. Again, neurology does not know the difference between a stressor of that sort versus something that is like truly life-threatening. And so many of us are walking around just living in this constant state of mobilization, also cue that drama addiction that so many of us are used to now, right?
100%.
And we're not in these states where we can feel profoundly connected to ourselves or profoundly connected to something that is larger than us. And perhaps most importantly, it's really challenging to heal when our nervous system is in a state of such hypervigilance.
If you work in a job where you're required to email people every day and every single email feels like you're getting chased by a tiger, no wonder people are in therapy 24/7. Like, truly. Of course, like that. Yeah, that's insane. Like it's crazy when I think about like how amazing our bodies are when we can like figure out how to integrate into these systems. But then like a lot of people just look for that outside solution. And I mean, like, I'm just as guilty of it as the next person. Me too. But like, I think, if you want to like appease the outside connection part of this, that's where having a community is crucially important. Yeah. And if you're not in a place where you feel safe to be able to like bond and build that community, then like, of course it's going to be a struggle because you're constantly trying to like move and find that thing that will solve your problems. When the reality is like, you need to be able to have that moment, whether that's, you know, internal, external, whatever that looks like, to be able to come into that moment of rest and actually engage with the people that need to hear and talk with you.
Absolutely. And like, I think that there's this, especially in American culture, and Evan, my husband, is French. And so some of these things have been like vastly interesting, we'll say, to like work through in terms of cultural differences.
Yeah.
And Americans, our culture is so oriented around doing and working and trying really hard and continuing to push and push and push to this place where it's like, okay, but when have we stopped to like check in with this thing?
Yes.
You know? And so change doesn't actually take place in all of that effort, right? The change, the evolution, the transmutation, the transformation actually happens in that moment of
yes.
Right.
My best example of this is I recently was down in El Salvador for a week. And the first day that I was down there, I landed, took the bus out to the hotel I was staying at.
Yeah.
Immediately dropped everything off in my room and walked down to the beach because it was right there. Just walked along on the beach, got to watch the sunset, all the things. I saw my client the next day, and after just like an entire day of walking up and down the beach, watching the sunrise, watching the sunset, just kind of like integrating with nature in as much ways as humanly possible and trying to kind of like let all of the stress of the world kind of like evaporate for a day. They, you know, walked in after just getting off their flight, and they were like, I think this might be the most relaxed I've ever seen you in the 6 months that I've been working with you. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, that checks out. This is like,
thank you for noticing.
Thank you for noticing. But I know that not everyone has the ability to take that much time off to be able to go do those things. But I think like the thing I'm consciously aware of is like, you might not necessarily have time to go walk on the beach in El Salvador for a week, but you can spend a little bit of extra time trying to make sure that when you go to sleep at night, you're actually getting a restored night's sleep.
Totally.
And like, as someone who over years, especially coming from the coffee industry where, you know, at the time I would be drinking between 6 to 10 cups of coffee a day. Like, I would get home at the end of the night and like, you know, I'm just laying in bed until midnight and then having to get up at 5 a.m. to do it all over again. Like that level of like stress because of not getting that daily rest, that compounds very quickly. And I think like, for me, I think that sleep is something that should be approachable to pretty much everyone. I mean, I think probably my most chaotic thing that my wife doesn't like is when it's 10 degrees outside, I'll open the windows in our room to cool it off because I want it to be cool. But I think like, you know, there's a lot of those things and common modalities that I kind of wish more people would kind of start to realize are approachable for everyone.
Totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And my mom's with newborns might have something different to say about that.
100%.
I had a new one come in today. She just had her third baby, and she's like, this baby wants to feed every 2 hours. And it's like, yes, because biologically, you know, at 4 or 5 weeks old, that's like what we're here to do, you know. And I also hear your profound need for rest, you know. And so it's like, we will get there. This is a season, you know. And how can we optimize those moments between the moments?
100%. Right? But I also like, I want to be consciously aware of there are going to be those moments where you're not going to have that opportunity. You know, if you're, you know, like me, one of the things I realized is if I want to make this job my career, there's a certain level of you just got to fucking get to work. Yeah. And it doesn't really matter what it looks like. You just got to keep going.
Totally.
And so, you know, it's hard for me to say this, but a mom with a new kid know that this is not a permanent thing.
Absolutely.
And you'll have that moment. You're going to look back on those days of no sleep and go, you know what? It sucked in the moment, but I'm glad we're here.
Absolutely.
And then when your kid sleeps through the night, you'll get a good night's sleep and hopefully feel a lot better.
Absolutely. I mean, it ties back into this conversation that we had as you were getting things set up, right? Where it's like, I looked at my schedule this week and I was like, oh my God, it's really fucking busy. Yeah. I'm coming in early to see babies. I'm coming, you know, staying late to see babies. I'm making a house call this week. We have this. And there was a part of me that like really experienced some anxiety around it. And I was crabby, You can ask Evan, my husband. And I literally like left to go work out on Monday morning and came back and I apologized to him. I was like, I'm so sorry. None of that has anything to do with you. And also like, I love what I get to do. So it's like, yes, my week this week is busy. And guess what? I love every single thing that is on my calendar this week. And like, what a motherfucking joy.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
It's really so special. Like to get to sit and have a conversation like this midweek at 2 p.m.
I know.
I just can't believe that like you and I get to do this.
Yeah.
You know, it's so special.
I still have my moments where I like constantly have to reflect and be like, wow, I'm grateful. Like this is something I remember dreaming about this as a kid when I was like 12.
Yeah.
And like even being able to text people now, and you know, I'm turning 32 in a couple months, and just realizing that it's like, oh, like I've literally been on this journey for 20 years.
Yeah.
And like to realize that and like come to that conclusion, and then all like, it's great though, because then when it's like when I'm working with people and I have to realize like, oh, you guys are like just getting started on this, so there's going to be a lot of things you're getting up to speed on, but it's going to be okay, and I promise you'll be fine.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's a wild time to be alive, and
it is insane, truly. I mean, I think it comes back again to like, what are the quality of mirrors that you have available to you in your life?
Oh, 100%.
You know, it's like I could have someone walk into the practice who royally fucking hates their job, and they just go to put in their hours and they leave and they try to live their life outside of that, and it's like, whoa. You know, like my mirror in that is like, I am so lucky to be fucking obsessed with what it is that I get to do for a job every single day, you know, or like even just my willingness to like go home on Monday morning and be like, hey, Ev, that had nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
You know, just like the willingness to take ownership, and like that's easier in some moments than others. And I think that we are finding, you know, pockets of community who are wanting to step more into that degree of ownership. And ultimately, like that is what will set, you know, just make a difference in our own lives. You know, it's like maybe it's easy for me to say, I don't really know, but I just feel like there's a choice in the suffering that we experience. You know, there's a choice in the mindset. Richard Rudd, who, you know, has been like the transmuter of the gene keys, which I have been like very deeply involved in. He's like, you know, struggle is imminent. You know, we're all going to have struggle, 100%. But suffering, it's optional. You know, we get to choose. We really get to choose.
That's super profound. And you hit on something like being obsessed with like the job that you're doing. Like that's something I have regardless of what it is that I'm doing. You know, back in the day I was driving work trucks out to the dealerships. I worked in a lot of cafes, worked in corporate IT. I've had the gamut of careers, but every single thing that I'm doing, my goal is to be like putting that effort in. So I'm curious for you, it seems like you very quickly were able to realize like, oh, you had your profound incident as a kid with your mom's experience, and then immediately going to school and like, okay, I'm going to learn all the technicals of this, but like you still had that like common thread of the passion for this. How did that passion just like get ignited? And like second follow up on that is like, how could you encourage someone who maybe is like struggling in their job right now to say, hey, like find that thing that you're passionate about and go for it. Like no one has to give you permission for it. Just do it.
Yeah, that's such a good question. So if you know me, you know that I am also very deep in human design.
Yeah.
Right. Human design is like a roadmap to your own authenticity. And I think a lot of us are innately following, you know, this map. Then as I've started to learn more about it, I've been like just this permission, right, to lean into what feels like truth for me.
Yes.
So if you're around me often or you come into the practice, you'll hear me speak in the form of like, well, is it a yes or is it a no?
Yeah.
Not to make it so like black and white and binary, because very little is.
Yeah.
You know, but I think ultimately a lot of us do have a profound sense of clarity as to what it is that we want or don't want. And there's just some stuff in the way that, you know, either generates fear or anxiety or just profound apprehension, you know, between like that feeling, that knowing ultimately, and an action step that could follow that.
100%.
So all that to say, I'm a generator. Okay. Generators and manifesting generators have all of the energy and move all of that through the world. So I am like a goddamn battery.
Yeah.
I am charged, you know, in the morning when I wake up, and I've got to drain my battery as I move through my day. And something about generators is that they typically have like a passion that they are here to follow. Growing up, I was literally obsessed and very passionate about field hockey. I knew at like 12 years old, I was like, I want to play Division I college. Not even like fully knowing what that meant, but I knew that I loved this thing so much. It was like a part of me. And I poured in loads, but like out of joy, because I literally was obsessed. Anyways, that's a whole other thing. But as I, played through college, I started to approach chiropractic school. Like that passion that I had for field hockey and that literal like obsession with like just the joy and the fun and play that it brought me, really like chiropractic took over that. Nice. And so I feel like I almost had like a cheat code because these things found me, and who's to say it couldn't have been something else? It very well could have been, but I happened to stumble upon these things that just lit me up and helped me to find more of myself in every way imaginable. So if you are someone who hasn't quite found that thing, I just want to like reiterate the fact that like it is okay to not know. Societally, we are taught and told that we need to do things in a very linear fashion, and like we just don't. We just motherfucking don't. Yeah. Okay. And so there's an opportunity to lean into the lack of clarity. And I do want to discern between clarity and certainty. Yeah. Certainty is just an illusion. Like I might be certain that I will come and see people tomorrow at 1 p.m. when I'm supposed to start my Thursday hours, but who the hell knows? Yeah. Right. So there are these like, yeah, it totally could. And so we build these structures in our lives to bring us a degree of perceived certainty, which, to our nervous system is experienced as safety. Right. But what happens if we replace certainty and this like deep knowing, with instead clarity? Clarity is like, okay, today I feel a profound sense that I am deeply enjoying this conversation. But if I would have made a list of things that you and I were going to chat about, oh my God, like how anxiety inducing would that be?
Oh yeah, definitely. That would stress me out too.
Totally. Ugh, no,
too much organization.
Yeah. No, thank you.
You're preaching to the choir on this. It's like, as someone who's a reflector, it's literally my job not to have certainty with what I'm doing. Yes, like that's totally. The way that I've come to that realization over the past several years, because it's like everything I'm doing, multiple times I've tried to start up this podcast, the multiple tens or hundreds of different jobs that I've done over the years, and kind of realizing that it's like, okay, well, like this is the thing I'm going to do in this moment because this is what I'm supposedly really good at. Yeah. But like, hopefully tomorrow and like over the next 6 months, I'm going to do something completely different because this is the skill set I need to step into. Absolutely. And just knowing like, kind of where that time comes together.
Totally. And like, I don't know, as a reflector too, like you guys are meant to move in like lunar cycles, which is so cool. It's so amazing. So it's like who you are today. I mean, for any of us, but especially for reflectors, I feel who you are today can be totally different in a lunar cycle or 2 lunar cycles. And having this, like the capacity and the willingness to stay open as opposed to like locking down what we believe or know to be true. It's like the way that things can find us is just, I don't know. I don't even have words for it. It's just like, it's so humbling.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of crazy. It also makes me laugh because the one thing that I'm constantly hammering home to people and weirdly off brand for me as a personality and my type is consistency. Mm. But it's interesting because I think even though like I'm kind of one of those people that kind of ebbs and flows with like kind of where things are going. Sure. There have been a lot of things in my life that I've been able to like relatively make consistent parts of my day, whether that's, waking up every morning and making a cup of coffee or, getting my morning workout in as often as I can. Like there's all these things I do on a regularly consistent basis as that like discipline, but it's like understanding that I do these things so that I can go into whatever the world has to throw at me.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, there's a willingness to like build structure into our day to day.
Yes.
But we do that so that way one day we can eventually like outgrow those structures and like 100%. Build new ones, you know, but like the magic happens in the breaking out of those of like, okay, that used to be this thing I like really had a lot of discipline around. And now it just like is ingrained in me. It's just like part of who I am. Right. And I, coming back to people who just like don't feel that profound sense of clarity, it's like, well, what are like little aspects of structure that you can build into your life so that you can cultivate enough internal and or external safety in your perception of your world so that you have a willingness to try something new.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's so easy to like go into that state of like hypervigilance where we are driven by a lot of fear, you know, that those are the programs, neurologically speaking. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, but when we get trapped in that, or even trapped in like a state of collapse where it's like, I don't have access to my resources, it's very challenging to want to go and explore. It's very challenging to want to step out of your comfort zone and experience curiosity, you know, and try new things. Because it's like, I'm already at capacity.
100%.
You know, and so again, that's where like having structures or a sense of discipline, or even just like your practices in your life that like support you in accessing even just like glimmers of who you know yourself to be on a profoundly like authentic and intrinsic level can change everything, you know. So we get glimmers of clarity, you know, to the point where it's like, oh, that thing I've been wanting to do, like there's a reason that thought has come your way. What if, you know, like maybe today is the day that we just say like, fuck it, I'm just going to go for it and just see what happens on the other side. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. I had a train of thought and I completely just went off in another direction. I remember what it was. I have a lot of conversations with one of my friends about this, and a big thing she always comes back to with me is she's like, okay, Brandon, you have an unnatural desire to do hard things. And I was like, okay, I get that, but also like there's got to be a way to like get people to that like intrinsic motivation to do the challenging thing.
Sure.
I'm curious, do you feel like it would be one of those things where if someone is in that like constant state of fight or flight, they're more willing to do hard things or averse to doing hard things? And do you think your ability to take on challenges is directly correlated to your ability to be able to get into that like place of safety and comfort?
Sure. Oh, that's
like,
such a good question.
I also kind of, the like follow-up story on that is like, if I have too much time of rest, which I'm currently coming to the end of right now, my brain creates the most diabolical problems to solve because I need to do that challenging, hard thing.
Sure. So I'd say that this actually exists on a continuum, and we can talk about the two extremes of this.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's one experience where self-preservation is high, right? So it's like, ugh, I don't have the capacity to try something new. Then there's another extreme of this where self-preservation is rather low. And those are your people who are like, I need the adrenaline to feel alive. Yeah. Those are your people who are going to push it, you know, all the way. Those are the people who are going to maybe go for those incredibly hard workouts to the point where their body's not even recovering. You know, those are people who are like, I must go skydiving twice a year to just feel alive. Those are maybe people who are like deeply engrossed in like the video games and like the adrenaline and the dopamine hits that provides for people. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You know, don't hear what I'm not saying, y'all. Yeah. But so those are like the two extremes. And so again, coming back to like the beginning of our conversation of like, well, what is the degree of intensity that we are requiring in our lives in order to like live and experience our world? Do we need to experience super high intensity to the place where we have like low self-preservation?
That's not good. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like I'm good on that, you know, but at the same time, it's like at some point we also need some sort of like get up and go.
100%.
You know, so we can take some action and like move some things forward in our lives. And I, you know, in my own experience, I think just by nature of like how I grew up, I love movement, and like I do love a challenge, whether that's like a mental challenge. I'm a huge Sudoku nerd. Nice. Sorry, and if you That's amazing. And like the spelling bee game on the goddamn New York Times app, catch me playing that because I want to hit genius every goddamn day. Yeah. Let me tell you. Do I do it? Some days, you know, but anyways, or, you know, whether it's more of like a physical challenge with like a tough workout. And there's just something that brings me such a sense of vitality and also like trust in self as I navigate those challenges, again, both mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, like whatever those things are. And it just like allows me to prove to myself that like whatever it is, I've got it.
100%.
I've got it. And I think there's something so beautiful about that commitment to self, and that ebbs and flows in its, you know, degree of discipline or structure or intensity, you know, just based on a season of life. But if there's like one piece of advice that I could give to people, it's like find simple ways to commit to yourself, because ultimately you are worth it. What better thing to invest in than like your own vitality and your own degree of like self-love and trust. You know?
Yeah.
So
that's That's really incredible. And I like that commitment to self, I think is a really great way to put it, because as someone, for me, it's like over my entire life, I, in another life, was a runner and really loved the idea of like endurance sports. And part of that was just because genetically, the way my body's built, I'm great for that.
Yes.
I've done a number of marathons. I have done a lot of distance running. That's like my thing. There's nothing better than going for a 10-mile run at 3 a.m. just to clear your head, like wholeheartedly. But something over the years that I've always struggled with on the flip side of that is I've always been a small person. Even though, yes, I'm 6'2", I'm for years was 135 pounds. And over the past number of years, a big thing that I've been like hyper focused on is like strength training and being able to like really grow into being a like more confident person. And that like commitment to self. And like, you know, one of my friends, he would post all the time, and his tagline, I think it was like DFY, do it for you, was the whole thing. And it was like every time he would do a workout, every time, whatever it was, do it for you. And I think that like commitment to taking care of yourself will ultimately be the driver that can get you to that like confident place to be able to take that step into your dream. And as like my purpose that I've like come to realize over like a number of years is I have a lot of dreams I want to do, and I know that I will get to a place where I can, you know, live all of them. But I'm also in a very unique space in what I do, who I am as a person, to be able to help other people live out their dream. And if I can do everything in my power to get people to that place, I'll do it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, and I just posted about it on Instagram this morning, you can't outsource the inner hard work. Because I love waking up and doing my workout. You can't hire someone to go work out for you and expect to get the results.
Right.
And there's a lot of these like internal things that we are constantly at battle with that I wish it's like once that clicks, that's where I see all my friends who just, you know, go off into the stratosphere are. But yeah.
Well, ultimately, the people that are the most like intriguing to be around are the people that are just like in their authenticity. There's something
100%.
so magnetic about that. And so to get to be in a role and like you're in that role, I'm in that role, and in very different capacities, which is what's so fucking amazing. Is like we're here to just watch people, like truly just be the witness to people stepping so fully into themselves that they could do anything.
100%.
You know? Oh my God, how cool. And like I also feel, especially like amongst women, there's such a rally of support. You know, a lot of women in my circle, whether they're like very close to me or just like more adjacent, especially like in the wellness space, everyone's just rooting for each other.
100%.
You know, there's not this degree of competition. And that to me is just so refreshing, because it's like, okay, for starters, there's plenty to go around. You know, there's no shortage of abundance. There's no shortage of creativity. Like everyone is down for collaboration all the time. And there's something, again, just so magnetic. You know, when people step into that authenticity, when they step into more of their, like what I'd call in chiropractic, or we would call, you know, in the chiropractic space, is like into your innate, you know, and out of your educated. Educated being more like the ego, the rationale, the need to know the step-by-step of the process, while the innate is like, ooh, I'm getting this nudge, right? It's your intuition. It's this sense of like profound self. And if more of us can continue to move towards that, you know, what kind of world will we be living in? Be so different.
Oh, it would be crazy different. That was a conversation I just had the other day, was like the idea of stepping into your intuition and trusting your gut on everything. And I like the way that I look at it is like all of the decisions that I've made that have been like these monumental shifts in my life were gut decisions. And every decision that I just kind of like noodled around and didn't make a decision here or there, like, to be honest, those opportunities came and went. But ultimately, like, there's a part of me that now I can look back on it and go, oh, those opportunities that I missed would have had me in a place doing a thing that I wouldn't have wanted.
Totally.
But I think now getting to a place where I can kind of step into that intuitive and say, like, this is the thing that, you know, I need to be doing, or my friends need to be doing. that's something I'm like starting to get a little bit more excited about, and like having those conversations.
Yes.
And especially because like now with the current trend of how everything is going, I articulate to all my friends, and I'm excited. And part of this podcast is going to be bringing that to people who want to hear it. But if you are curious about making your health better or being more in tune with who you are, like, I hope that this can be a place where people can come and hear those conversations. Because as much as I love all of the people that I listen to on podcasts, they're talking at like PhD level.
Sure.
And that's great for the people who, like me, have been like researching this stuff for 10 plus years. Yeah. But if you're just coming into this, you kind of need those like baby steps to get in the door. Totally. And then once you like get up to speed, you'll very quickly be like, okay, now I'm going to binge every single Andrew Huberman podcast because I need that PhD level of education. Right. But ultimately, a lot of the conversations I'm seeing now, we're kind of like splitting hairs at this top level. Sure. And completely missing the basics.
Yeah. I mean, what you're creating is such a potent resource for so many people. And just based on the guests that you were sharing with me that are on this week, that will be on, that have been on, it's just such a diverse array of people. And I think that there's a hunger, like from the community to learn more, but learn more at like a basic level so they can then pick and choose what they would like to dive into, who they'd like to connect with further. And also like, again, the mirrors.
Definitely.
What does that do for people who, maybe have a more diverse audience?
Yeah. Right? You said something. This has happened to me like 3 times in like recent episodes. Abundance, community. It took me, I will say, it probably took me like 6 or 7 years to get to a place of understanding what abundance means. I've read all the books, I've listened to all the podcasts, I've heard all the mindset people talk about it. For someone at home who's maybe they work 2 jobs and they're like, okay, I keep hearing this thing that abundance is out there.
Sure.
What are some key steps that you can take to get into that like transitionary period to where you'll like realize that moment of abundance and like be able to feel that?
I'd like to share a small story.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love stories.
Love a story. Buckle up, y'all. No, I'm just kidding. So I had been living abroad from August 2019 through October of 2021 before moving back to Columbus. And so part of why I took off to live abroad was because I knew I wanted to have my own practice. I just didn't know where geographically in the world I wanted to be. Yeah. I grew up with grandparents who are Holocaust survivors who spoke Yiddish, Hebrew, Polish in front of us. My best friends growing up were Russian, Ukrainian. So hearing, Russian in their household, I grew up around languages, around many different cultures, and I knew I wanted more of that. And so I set off to go live abroad and wait to step off a plane or a train or an automobile and go, this is home. It has found me. And so after about 2 years of living abroad, living in several different countries, having met Evan, I actually just started to realize that home would be wherever I decided to start. And my practice and my community would form around wherever I decided to plant some roots at the time. So had been most recently living in Belgium, in Bruges, which is a magical, magical place for those who have or have not visited. But I started to get a nudge that I actually needed to return to Columbus. And so nudge, intuitive hit, whatever. It was loud. I literally could not ignore it. And so I booked a flight. It was kind of peak COVID times. I wasn't able to then get back into Europe if I left. Evan couldn't come to America to come visit me. And plus I'd overstayed in Europe without a proper visa. So I couldn't return for 90 days, even if, the COVID stuff weren't going on. But something in me was so strongly telling me I needed to leave. I needed to go back to Columbus. And so my dad is here in Columbus, and I ended up moving in with him and didn't know if I was staying or going. Had no clue, but just knew I needed to come back. I needed time to reconnect with myself, my family, my friends, and just pause. Yeah. It was a wild time for everybody. And in a time really where everyone was so locked down in place, I actually had found a way to move to 4 or 5 different countries, in this same period of time. So it was just this very it was just a funky moment in life. And so I just needed time to land. And so I sat in my shit for about 3 weeks, was unsure. Am I staying? Am I going? What am I doing? Oh my God. And if you know me, you know that I could talk to a goddamn wall. And so when I would go out, I would want to be able to say, hey, my name is Gabby. I have a business here in Columbus and you're going to want to know about it. Or say, oh, you know what? I'm out of here in 90 days. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. And it was like eating me up that I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And so between meeting someone who's a dear friend now, Kate Borges, who is an amazing massage therapist in Bexley, her and I met very early on in my return to Columbus, and just a couple of other experiences that I had after about 3 weeks of being back in Columbus. And I hadn't really been here in like 10 years, between undergrad, grad school, living abroad, just like living my life. I had what we call in chiropractic a thought flash, THOT. It's like this thing that just like comes through you, so one of those big like intuitive hits or a download. Yeah. And I had this thought flash come through and it was literally just like, you are here today. You're here today. You don't have to know what you're doing in 90 days. You don't have to know what you're doing in 9 weeks, 9 months, 9 years, but you are here today.
Yeah.
And so at my dad's house, a little nostalgic, the house just sold and closed. So it is no more for those who are inside space OGs. But there was this really beautiful lofted area, like right by the front door. And the house is on New Bixby Road between Whitehall and Reynoldsburg and has a ravine behind the house. And it's this very modern home where like the whole back of the house is windows. So we had deer and owls and eagles and you name it, like it was back there,
Sounds like a wonderful nature reserve.
It literally was. And so this house was incredible. And essentially like in this lofted area, I built the first iteration of the Insight Space. And my dad, God bless that guy, he's literally the best. He allowed me to practice out of his home for about 9 months. And so the reason I provide this context in your question about abundance is because I got to experience firsthand what it feels like to truly have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Okay.
Yeah.
I already had a portable table. I had a space that I didn't need to pay rent in. I had already built my website and poured in the effort to cultivate a feeling that I wanted to generate for people just through my words or through image. Yeah. And I had time. I literally had nothing to lose. So what I did is I said, okay, I will launch my website on November 8th of 2021. And I committed to posting every day on Instagram for 90 days because for me, that's like a joyous creative outlet. I love to write and I love to write about chiropractic and what this is and also what this isn't.
Yeah.
And so in doing that, I really got to catalog this profound feeling of abundance. And I had absolutely nothing to lose and only everything to gain. And so that is a very unique experience. However, in moments, other aspects of my life or moments even in the practice where I'm not feeling that same degree of abundance because I now have rent to pay and I have overhead and I have a team that deserves to be very well paid, goddammit.
Yeah.
And other things that come up, I literally will go back to those moments of having nothing to lose and everything to gain and just like really like I feel like I plug in to that feeling of abundance. And sometimes it takes seconds, sometimes it takes days before I can like really embody what that is. And so if you have had other moments, they don't have to be as profound as like starting a business, right? Or starting to build a community because those are big, but just small moments of like sitting at a table with people that you love, that is abundance, right? If you are, you do find yourself doing something with immense joy and you are feeling this degree of just like total presence, like that can be abundance. It doesn't have to be these like grand scale things that like uproot our lives. It can be like the moments between the moments because that's ultimately where life happens. And so the invitation I have is just to plug into those, and let it occupy you, let it take up all of the space, within the confines of your skin and just feel what that feels like and just invite in a sense of trust that can actually translate to all other aspects of your life because ultimately, coming back to this conversation of mirrors, everything in our world is here to just reflect back to us who we are and what we are in any given moment. And there's so much power in that if we are willing to allow ourselves to see and be seen fully.
Definitely.
Right? So,
plug
in.
I think about that in a very similar way. I had a moment shortly after moving to Ohio. I trying to convince all of my friends in California that moving to Ohio was the right decision. And a lot of them weren't having it right off the bat. They were like, what are you doing? You're moving across the country for this girl? Like, what you're insane. I was like, no. It's not just that. It's like this creative community, like all these other things that I threw out there. And I laugh because literally the week that I moved to Columbus, 2 of the couples in that like creative group broke up, and it was just this like division and chaos, and like the community that I thought I was moving into that was going to be the like, oh, I'm going to finally launch my photography career. I'm going to do all these things. I have all these people around me. Yeah. And that just immediately dissolved. And so I came into this whole thing like, okay, well, now what am I going to do? I can work at a coffee shop, and just had that moment of like, okay, I'm going to do the thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
Banged my head against the wall for months until I like had this moment to bring back to the mirrors, reflecting on the reality that all of the people that I looked up to that had the business I wanted, that were, you know, had the house, had the car, had the life I wanted, were all in their mid-30s. I was roughly 22, 23 when I moved to Ohio.
Wow.
And so I, in that moment, in a weird moment of clarity, was able to go, okay, let me give myself 8 years to fuck off and do whatever I want. And if I turn 30 and I'm still working in a coffee shop and clearly have no direction to go in, then I'm going to have to sit down in front of that mirror and have a really hard conversation with myself about what I'm doing and what my goals are. And literally the year I turned 30 was the 3rd year of running my business freelance. And that's when things kind of took off.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because it was that moment of like, I didn't directly feel like I was moving in that direction. And if you look at my actual like career arc, it doesn't make any sense. I was born and raised adjacent to Hollywood, wanted to go into the film industry, and literally moved to Ohio to pursue that.
Obviously.
Of course, obviously. It's the obvious thing to do. Only to immediately give up on that career and dream for 8 years. Only to, at the 11th hour, come back into it with a vengeance, ready to go. And I laugh because I literally started my business 3 months before COVID hit. And it was an eye-opening experience because all of my friends that I worked with, we were baristas / designers, baristas / painter, baristas / artist.
Yeah.
And I was so excited for a moment because in this moment, every single one of them was forced to stop doing the barista and become who they were supposed to be.
Wow. Yeah.
Unfortunately, not all of them continued in that direction.
Sure.
And they went back to the safe career. But it was that moment for me of like, I was already in that, like, I come hell or high water, I have to make this happen.
Yeah.
And so things worked out and I was able to make those connections and find that thing to make it happen. But
so cool.
I say that story to like kind of tie in and like, you know, for anyone listening at home, just to like realize that it's like, there are those moments when you'll feel like the entire world is crashing down on you. Like there's no way for me to get out of this thing.
Yeah.
But I promise like that opportunity you're looking for is going to be like within that network of people that you're connecting to, that you have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
And yeah, the abundance is always out there.
It is. It is. It's just like it sounds so cliche, but it's literally just like a frequency of like choosing to plug it in.
Yeah.
God damn it. And I find it so interesting that it's so often, and then it's like, well, does it have to be? But so often in those moments of profound, like breakdown, we could say breakdown of systems, breakdowns of structures, breakdown of like that perceived certainty.
Yes.
Right. Where so much goodness is born, you know, and I have so where we are right now, we're at the Insight space, we're in the practice, and this has been our home for about 2.5 years now. And, you know, there were literally about 3 weeks between working out of my dad's house and moving into this space where I was in a small space in Bexley. Nice. And was subletting from someone who was lovely. And some things fell through literally on my second day in the space, and I had hired somebody to come in and like be like my front desk. You know, she had left a previous job to come and work for me. I went from having zero overhead essentially to having a rent to pay and now having someone's salary to pay. And on day 2 of being in the space, it was like, oh my God, this isn't going to work. We can't be here. And we are now in the carriage house of, behind Replenish, or the yoga carriage as it's known around here.
Yeah.
And I had fortunately had a meeting set up with Deja and Chanel, who own 2 of the owners of Replenish. And coincidentally at the end of that week, and we weren't meeting to discuss spaces. We were meeting just to connect outside of the practice and just be in community and do what we do. And the meeting turned, and I looked at them and I said, here's what's happening. I need a space. And they looked at me, they looked at each other, they looked back at me, and they were like, we have one for you. And so we sat down, we chatted terms, we chatted prices, of rent, things like that. And I was scared. Yeah. I was scared shitless, because I went from having, again, no rent or no overhead in general to having now rent, and it was a very low rent. It was like I was in the space in Bexley, I think it was like $350 a month. It was like something silly. It was next to nothing, you know what I mean? But still, it was like money that was then going into the business that wasn't being spent before. More importantly, it was like this other girl's salary who was working with me at the time, and I was like, oh my God, like it's not just me anymore. So anyways, all that to say, I had a client at the time who was in real estate development, and I had gone to look at some other spaces with him that were kind of up and coming. Timelines didn't work. Like nothing was opening for me in this regard. And I told him, what the rent would be here. I told him really like about the situation. I was very vulnerable, and he looked at me and he said, I'm going to pass advice on to you that someone passed on to me at a critical point in my life, and it changed everything for me. And he looked me in the eyes and he told me he said, literally, bet on yourself. Bet on yourself.
That's it.
That's it. And so I got my like confirmation, of truth, of a yes in my body. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to continue to bet on myself. Because also if I look historically, me choosing to bet on myself is what has gotten me to every aspect of my life that has been joyful and abundant and lovely and life-giving and transformative. Right? So I bet on myself.
2.5 years later, what is the most rewarding aspect to this scaling up, having a space, having employees? Totally. As someone who is also averse to having overhead, because it's the scariest thing. Like you're like, there's no consistency to what I'm doing, and now you want me to consistently have to pay someone. Sure. How has that been? Like,
I think I just continue to bet on myself. Yeah. Ultimately, it's like, I love having a home base. That's love having a space that I can invite people into. When I was earlier on in practice, and like getting into this space, one of my favorite things to do is to invite other practitioners to just like meet me here. The space is very special for a multitude of reasons, but like when you step in, it's like, there's something different here.
Yeah.
And you might not know exactly what goes on, and that's okay. I almost prefer it that way, right? Let's have some degree of like mystery and lack of certainty.
Yes.
But there's just something so special about having a space that is filled with community. Like you came in here about 30 minutes after my last crew of people cleared out, but like from 9 to 1 today, it was bustling in here. And like we've expanded from just me to now there's a team of 4 of us. Evan, my husband's a chiropractor as well, and he works here, and he's gone through a rigorous process regarding licensure to get licensed in the state of Ohio because he was trained in Spain. So we're growing immensely, and like to feel this place really busting at the seams is just, it's literally a dream. Not to say that it doesn't occupy moments of like, God, that was hard, or wow, something's coming up that we've got to work through. It's not to say that those moments don't exist, because they absolutely do. And there's a sense of trust both in self, in our team, in the way that we collaborate with, Replenish to like all of us to occupy space on this campus, that we will always come out with a deeper sense of trust, of love, of compassion, on the other side of these things, which ultimately is just allowing us to show up more fully for our community, both those who come in and get to lay on these tables and be a part of this in person, and our growing virtual community, because that's gotten, sizably increased in the last chunk of time here. So
that's huge. I love that. what have been some of the things for you in terms of being able, like, I love talking about community with a lot of people. And I think, there's a lot of different ways that can kind of like manifest itself.
Sure.
Especially, and part of this is just from my experience in like the online space. As something like chiropractic that's a very physical experience, what are some of the ways you've been able to really foster that community online for people to engage with and connect?
Totally. If you look at our Instagram, which is like our primary source of like building virtual community, we don't do anything that's fear-based. I think there's enough of that. Everything that we post, we keep it very congruent. For me, that's like my filter that I run everything through. Like, is this in integrity with who we are, who we want to be, how we want to communicate, and the feeling that we want others to feel, if they were coming into this space? How can we cultivate through our words in a virtual way, or how can we cultivate this through the imagery or the visual, essentially, right, that's being paired with certain words? And so we keep everything very aligned in that regard, where we are here to provide wisdom and knowledge and information that is coming through a lens of biological imperatives and evolutionary principles backed up with neurology. And so something that I am incredibly passionate about is helping and walking with people as they amplify their own trust in self, and as they really understand how to listen to their own intuition, their own internal guidance system. And so I like to say that there's no force more potent than that of the maternal instinct.
Yeah.
Right. 100%. But for a lot of people, that's gotten very watered down. That might feel far away. And so everything we share is in support of that. How can we amplify what you already know to be true? How can we support you in trusting the cues that your child or your infant or yourself, are receiving, and take those at face value and not question what you feel and what you know to be true. So it's just been really fun to really find my voice. Morgan is primarily who's doing our social media right now, and she's absolutely crushing it. Sadia is doing incredible with a lot of our stories, in our day to day. So we really get to give people a glimpse of like, what you see is what you get. And that's really one of the biggest pieces of feedback for people who have been following us for a long time or a short time, but then they come into the practice and receive care. They're like, oh, it's exactly how I thought it would be. I feel exactly how I thought it would feel, because we're not full of shit. And I think that in a world that is so full of shit and noise, I'm really grateful that something, that the truth that we emit does come through.
100%. Yeah. I always tell people all the time, if you're going to hire me to create a commercial or, tell your story or anything like that, like, I'm always going to double click in and figure out if you actually have a really good product, because you can spend all the money in the world with me to create a really great advertisement.
Yeah.
But if ultimately at the end of the day, if what I create for you is not the experience that people have when they come into your space,
sure,
like, one, I'm not going to feel great about that. And two, people are very quickly going to realize that what they're seeing online is not what that is.
Right.
And you can't outrun those negative Google reviews, unfortunately.
Sadly. Yeah.
But I think that's pretty incredible. And that's something that's unique, especially in like the wellness space, because that's something I know a lot of people strive to, but ultimately to actually create it and cultivate it, you have to have a personal ownership of that experience.
Sure.
And being able to foster that for people is truly incredible.
Thank you. So much. Truly.
Amazing. Well, I honestly know that we could definitely talk for 3,
Yes,
4, 5, 6 hours. I also can talk to a brick wall.
We're very good at that.
Yes. But I just wanted to, again, say thank you so much for your time to come on and sharing all of this wisdom with the audience. And hopefully we'll get to do this again sometime soon.
I would absolutely love that. Brandon, it was so nice to chat with you. And I just, every time you and I get in front of each other, whether it's virtually, in person, when we're lucky enough to do so, it is just such a lovely conversation. It always inspires such deep thought, within me. And so it's just so nice to have that reflected back. So thank you. Thank you for what you do.
I appreciate it. Awesome. Well, bye, everybody.
Bye.